I decided to visit my father in a nursing home a few weeks ago. I'm 35, and my life mostly revolves around screens and code. It had been years since we spoke, and I thought maybe this visit would change things. When I arrived, the place looked old. The walls were glaring white under the fluorescent lights. A strange smell hung in the air, something like antiseptic mixed with fading flowers. I felt uncomfortable right away. It didn't feel right, but I ignored it. As I walked down the corridor, I thought about our last fight. Those harsh words weighed on me. I found his room. Was it 205 or 207? I knocked. At first, there was silence. Then the door creaked open. My father looked frail. He wasn't the strong man I remembered. I noticed a sign taped to the door that said, "Do not disturb at night." I thought that was strange, but didn't say anything. During our visit, we talked about mundane things. I tried to focus on the moment, but something nagged at me. He mentioned rules I didn't understand, but I didn't push him. I wanted to keep things light. Shadows flickered just outside the room, but I brushed it off. Over the next few days, things got stranger. I noticed the staff whispering among themselves, casting worried glances towards certain rooms. Some patients acted agitated, especially in the evenings. I felt like I was missing something important, but I couldn't figure out what it was. Each night, I heard more whispers. But when I asked the staff, they just avoided my gaze. I felt more and more paranoid. One evening, as the sun set, I felt drawn to the whispers. The air turned cold as I walked the hall. I reached the door marked, "Do not disturb at night." I put my hand on the handle, my heart racing. Just as I was about to turn it, I heard a soft, breathy whisper behind me. "Why are you here?" I turned around quick. I was completely alone. My stomach dropped. I didn't know what to think. Something felt very wrong. I was scared, but I also knew I had to know more about that door. The next day, I asked my father about it. His eyes widened. "You shouldn't go near that door," he said in a shaky voice. "They don't like company at night." I pressed for more, but he changed the subject. I felt anger and concern mix in my gut. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling. I crept out of my room and back to that door. The whispers became louder, more frantic. I felt the cold air wrap around me. I placed my hand on the handle again, determined to find out what lay beyond. Suddenly, the door swung open. I jumped back. No one was there. Then I heard that whisper again, soft and clear. "You shouldn't have come here." The fear washed over me. What secrets were hidden? What had I stumbled into? I had to know more, even if it terrified me. I stood frozen in front of the door, heart racing. The whisper echoed in my mind. "You shouldn't have come here." I took a step back, instinctively glancing down the dim hallway. The flickering lights cast shadows that danced around me, making the empty space feel alive. After a moment, I stepped forward again. I had to know what lay beyond. I hesitated. What if there was something dangerous? Yet, more than fear, curiosity consumed me. I gripped the handle and gently pushed the door open wider. The room beyond was dark, heavy curtains drawn tight. It smelled damp, like mold. I felt a chill run through me as I stepped inside. My eyes adjusted to the darkness. In the corner, I could make out something large and covered, a shape. I took a cautious step towards it, my breath quickening. I could hear my heart thumping loudly against my chest. What was hidden beneath that cover? Just then, I heard a faint rustle from behind me. I whipped around, but nothing was there. The door swung gently, creaking on its hinges. It was almost as if something wanted to come in or go out. I took a deep breath, pushing the thoughts out of my head, and faced the covered shape again. As I drew closer,
I reached out and touched the fabric. It was coarse under my fingers. I hesitated. Then, with a swift motion, I pulled it away. My breath caught in my throat. What I uncovered was not what I expected. It was a nurse's station, abandoned and cluttered with medical charts. The walls were lined with photographs of patients. They looked familiar. My father was among them, younger and smiling. The others seemed like shadows of their former selves. I suddenly heard laughter, bright and ringing, coming from outside the room. But it felt wrong, almost mocking. The laughter faded quickly, replaced by whispers again. I couldn't quite pick out the words, but they sounded frantic, desperate. "Help us," a voice pleaded in the distance. My stomach tightened. My feet moved almost instinctively toward the noise. I stepped out of the dark room and into the corridor. But the atmosphere changed instantly. The lights flickered even more violently now, bathing everything in an eerie glow. I scanned the area, feeling watched. I noticed one of the nurses peering around the corner, her eyes wide. I opened my mouth to ask her what was going on, but before I could, she quickly ducked away like a startled animal. "Wait!" I shouted, but she didn't respond. Panic surged through me. What was happening? Then I realized I was alone again, in a place that felt increasingly hostile. The whispers grew louder, and the voices merged into a single chilling warning. I turned to head back to my father's room, but a figure caught my eye down the hall. Before I could process it, I saw a patient emerge from a door marked "Staff Only." His eyes were wild, and he pointed at me, trembling. "You have to leave! They're coming!" My pulse quickened. Who were they? What did he mean? The hallway closed in around me. This was no longer just a nursing home. It felt more like a prison. I needed answers, but now I was afraid of what I might discover. I stumbled back, my mind racing. The patient's warning echoed in my ears. "They're coming! You have to leave!" Who were they? Instinctively, I took a cautious step back. The way the hall twisted and turned added to my disorientation. I needed to find a way out, and fast. Before I could decide my next move, a cold rush of air swept through the hallway, sending a shiver down my spine. The lights flickered again, and I caught glimpses of shapes moving in the shadows. I pressed my back against the wall, trying to remain unseen. My gut twisted into knots. Something was definitely off here. I stole a glance down the hall. The wild-eyed patient had vanished as quickly as he appeared. Panic gripped me once more. My father was in one of these rooms, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible lurked close by. I needed to get to him, but I had to be cautious. I crept down the hallway, each step feeling like an invitation to whatever darkness awaited. The whispers intensified, gaining urgency, yet the words remained undecipherable. I held my breath, straining to catch something, anything that made sense. As I approached a door, I pushed it open slowly. Inside, I found what looked like a common room. Dimly lit, it was full of empty chairs and abandoned games. A silence settled over me, thick and suffocating. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from behind me. I whirled around, and to my horror, I saw a shadow flicker across the wall. My heart raced as I squinted into the dim light, but there was nothing there. Breathless, I turned to leave the room when I caught sight of a photograph pinned to the wall. It looked strikingly familiar. Another image of my father, this time standing beside a woman. A nurse, perhaps? The date printed below was just a month before he had come to this place. Confusion knotted in my stomach. What was his connection to all of this? I reached out to take the photo down, but paused when a voice broke through my thoughts. I turned slowly, and my body went cold. It was the nurse from earlier, but this time she had company. 2 others stood right behind her, their faces shrouded in shadow. "Please," she said, her voice trembling, You shouldn't have come here. You need to go." "Why? What's happening?" I blurted, desperation creeping in. "They're coming for you," the other nurse whispered, her eyes darting around, searching for something unseen. "You must leave now." As fear gripped my heart, I realized this was my only chance for answers. I stepped closer. "Who's coming? What do you know about my father?" But before I could muster a response, the flickering lights stopped abruptly, plunging the room into darkness. My stomach dropped as I felt an icy breath on my neck. Then everything went dark. I gasped as the darkness surrounded me. My heart thundered in my chest, and I instinctively reached out, hoping to find something solid to hold on to, but my hands met only empty air. Panic surged through me. I needed light, direction, anything. Then, just as suddenly as it had vanished, a dim light flickered back to life. I blinked rapidly, trying to adjust my eyes. The common room appeared unchanged, but the nurses were gone. My mind raced. Had they vanished into the darkness, or had I imagined them altogether? I needed to keep moving. The images of the shadowy figures haunted me as I stepped cautiously toward the door. My father's well-being was at stake. I needed to find him. I moved into the hallway again, my pulse quickening with each step. As I walked, the whispers returned, louder and more urgent than before. I followed the sounds, desperation driving me forward. They seemed to guide me, leading me down a corridor lined with closed doors. I pressed my ear against one near the end. A voice, familiar yet distorted, echoed from within. "Please, no more," it cried softly, and my heart sank. It was my father. "Dad?" I called out, my voice trembling. "Can you hear me?" Silence followed. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorknob. The last thing I wanted was to open a door to who knows what. I took a deep breath and twisted the handle. The door creaked open. Inside, I found a stark room with only a bed and a small window letting in a weak beam of light. And there, lying on the bed, was my father. With disheveled hair and a pale face, he looked fragile. A part of me felt relief seeing him, but my heart twisted at the sight. "Dad!" I rushed to his side, but as I reached for him, a shadow darted past the window. I froze, scanning the room, but it was empty. "Who's there?" I shouted, half expecting a response. No answer. Goosebumps prickled my skin. Then my father stirred. His eyes fluttered open, but they were clouded and unfocused. Who are you?" he croaked. Confusion etched on his face. "Dad, it's me, your daughter. I'm here to take you home," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the hole of dread opening in my stomach. But his expression shifted. "No, you can't stay here. They look for you. You need to leave." A chill ran through me. Was this about the nurses, or something more sinister? Before I could respond, the room trembled as the lights flickered once more. I swiveled to look outside, an instinct carving out panic within me. The corridor was empty, but the echoing whispers began to rise again, and I felt danger looming. "Who's coming?" I pressed, looking back at my father. But his eyes turned to a gaze of terror. "Run!" he gasped out, as a faint thump reverberated through the floor, growing closer. Then I saw it, a dark figure moving toward the doorframe. I didn't think twice. Adrenaline kicked in as I grabbed my father's arm to pull him up. "We need to go, now!" Just then, the door slammed shut behind me. I glanced back in time to see the dark figure step into the light. "Leave her," it growled, and hope shattered in my chest. I realized then I wasn't just here for my father. I was part of something far worse, and I was running out of time. I yanked my father toward the door, fear coursing through me as I felt the air grow heavy and oppressive. With each second, I could sense the dark figure moving closer, its shadow stretching ominously across the room. I needed to think. I needed a way out. "Dad, can you walk?" I asked urgently, glancing back at the door. I don't know, he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. Hold on to me. I wrapped my arm around his waist and guided him slowly towards the window. It wasn't safe here. I could almost hear the laughter of the whispers, mocking us as we moved. The dark figure was nearly upon us. I could see its form more clearly now, a tall, menacing silhouette that loomed like a storm cloud. Hurry, I urged, keeping my eyes on the door. Just then, the lights flickered again, and my heart dropped as the entire room was cast in shadows. Finally seeing the figure close up sent my stomach into knots. It wasn't human. Its features twisted and elongated, with hollow eyes that seemed to absorb all light. "Let her go!" I shouted defiantly, though my voice trembled. The entity paused, its cold gaze fixating on us. "Her time is up," it hissed, the voice slithering into my mind like ice. I couldn't let it take my father. I had to protect him. "We're leaving," I shouted, surprising even myself with the strength in my voice. My legs felt like lead, but adrenaline pushed me forward. "Dad, jump!" I pulled him toward the window, regretting the decision as soon as I acted. Would we really leap out? What lay beyond? But it was my only option. The shouts of the figure escalated, and I could feel its anger pulsing in the air. Just as we reached the window, it lunged forward, its hand stretching out as if to grab us. With a burst of urgency, I pushed my father through the window, following close behind. The glass shattered into 1,000 pieces, and we fell into a darkness that felt alive. I braced myself for impact, the ground racing toward us. We landed hard, rolling on damp grass. Pain shot through my elbow, but I forced myself to stand. The night air was cold, invigorating, but it thrummed with danger. "Where are we?" my father whispered, dazed. "I don't know." I scanned the surroundings, chilling unease settling in my chest. Our escape hadn't gained us freedom. All I could see was an eerie fog that swallowed everything beyond a few feet. "Look!" My father's voice broke through my swirling thoughts. I turned to see faint lights flickering in the distance. They beckoned like will-o'-the-wisps. But were they safe, or merely another trap? "The lights," I murmured, blinking against the fog. Those whispers were still there, more distant now, but they echoed familiar words. "Maybe they can help us." "No." He gripped my arm tightly. "We can't trust them." But trust felt like a luxury we didn't have. Then the ground trembled beneath us, and panic shot through my veins. "Run!" I shouted, and without another thought we sprinted towards the lights. Every step felt heavy, and the whispers returned, clearer now. Warnings? Promises? I could hardly tell. That's when I saw it, shadows shifting at the edge of the light, figures gathering, ready to claim us. "Faster, Dad," I urged, pulling him with me as dread knotted deep in my gut. We were running into the unknown, but whatever waited behind us was far worse. We bolted forward, desperation fueling our speed. The flickering lights shimmered ahead, casting an otherworldly glow that felt both inviting and dangerous. I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows were alive, swirling around us like a living blanket, eager to snatch us back. "Just a bit further," I called to my father. Glancing back, the dark figure lingered at the edge of the fog, its elongated arms reaching into the void. It hadn't followed. Yet. The lights grew brighter as we barreled through the mist, and I could see now that they were just small lanterns hanging from trees. Relief washed over me momentarily. This had to be a safe place, a sanctuary maybe. I risked another look over my shoulder. It wasn't close, but the echoes of its voice lingered in my mind, chilling me to the bone. "Keep moving, Dad," I urged, pushing him ahead of me. We stumbled into a clearing where the true source of the lights became apparent. A tiny cabin stood before us, its windows glowing like beacons. "Is it safe?" my father asked, panting heavily. His face was pale, and I could see he was on the verge of panic. I hope so. I pulled him closer, my instincts screaming at me to get inside. I stepped up to the door, heart racing as I knocked tentatively. The sound echoed unnaturally, wild and hollow. Nothing happened. I glanced back at my father, who seemed to grow more anxious by the second. "Maybe we should go around," he suggested, rubbing his arms as if trying to ward off the chill.
I had long ditched my jacket in the chaos, and the night air was biting. "Just a minute," I replied, knocking again, louder this time. "Hello? Is anyone home?" My pulse quickened in the silence that followed. Just as I was about to knock one more time, the door creaked open. A figure stood in the doorway, a woman dressed in a long white gown, her hair streaming down her back like a waterfall. She looked at us with wide eyes, but the expression on her face was unreadable. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice soothing yet firm. We need help," I stammered, fighting to appear calm. "We came from back there." I pointed to the fog, the shadows creeping just behind the lanterns. I could feel the oppressive weight of the world we had fled, lurking just beyond the comfort of the light. "Come in," she said, finally, stepping aside. I pulled my father through the threshold, anxiety prickling at the back of my mind. Was it a mistake letting her in? As we crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind us. My breath caught. Inside, the atmosphere was oddly warm, yet shadows flickered against the walls, stretching and curling. I watched as the woman moved delicately through the room, her footsteps soundless. "What's your name?" she asked, not bothering to look back as she arranged some items on a table. "Anna," I replied hesitantly. "And this is my dad, Walter. I know who you are," she interrupted, her gaze now fixed upon us. My heart sank. "What do you mean?" I asked, fear pooling in my stomach. "You don't belong here," she said, tilting her head. "But that doesn't matter now. The entity will come for you both soon. You must prepare for what lies ahead." "Prepare?" my father exclaimed, his voice shaking. "Prepare for what?" But before she could respond, a shadow passed over the cabin, swirling outside the windows. It was here. I spun around, panic enveloping me. The whisper swelled, mingling with my heartbeat, drowning out everything else. "Stay close," I whispered to my father as the darkness thickened. And just like that, the lights began to flicker. The lights flickered faster, casting erratic shadows that danced around us. My heart raced with each pulse of brightness, as if they too were anticipating something sinister. I looked at the woman, her calm demeanor contrasting the storm brewing around us. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice strained. "You must listen," she replied, still calm. "Do not show fear. Do not engage with it." "Engage with what?" I asked, feeling a lump rising in my throat. The shadows outside pressed closer, the whispers weaving through the air, blending into a cacophony of unsettling sounds. Before she could answer, the door rattled violently. I jumped back, pulling my father with me. "What is that?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "It wants in," she said, her eyes steady on the door. "You must stay close to me. I can protect you, but only if you follow my lead." The door trembled once more, and a low growl rumbled from the darkness. I could feel it inching nearer, a palpable presence just beyond the threshold. The last remnants of my hope dwindled. "Dad, we have to stay strong," I said, trying to mask my panic with a sense of reassurance. "We can't let it see us afraid." The woman moved toward the hearth, where a fire burned with an inexplicable flicker. She leaned down, rummaging through its depths. "Here, take this," she said, pulling out a small iron bell. It felt strangely heavy in my hands. "If it gets too close, ring this. It will create a barrier." "What good will that do?" my father asked, shaking his head. "We need to escape." "There is no escaping it. This cabin is all we have,"
she replied, her voice darkening. "Trust me, you are safer here than out there." The growling outside became sharper, more demanding. I peeked out the window, heart racing at the sight of a shifting shadow, its outline grotesque and inhuman. It seemed to pulse as if the fog itself was alive. And then it lunged, slamming into the door. The cabin jolted. My father gasped, his eyes wide with terror. "Stay back!" I shouted, gripping the bell tightly, instinctively drawing closer to the woman. She didn't flinch. Instead, she turned, focusing her gaze on the door as if she could see through it. "We need more time," she murmured, her forehead furrowing in concentration. "Just hold tight." But as I clutched the bell, a horrifying thought struck me. "What if it gets in?" I whispered, my voice shaking. "Then we must be prepared," she replied, steady but with a tinge of urgency. "It will test us. It leads on fears. Trust your instincts, and whatever you do, don't break the circle." Before I could ask what she meant, the door splintered, shadows swirling like a tempest. The wood screeched a terrible warning. I felt every muscle in my body tense, the desire to flee rising within me. And then it hit me. The whispers had changed. They called my name, dripping with malice. "Anna." I didn't know who was calling, but as I turned to look at my father, to see his fear mirrored in my own, I realized this battle was just beginning. Then everything went dark. I opened my eyes to gray. Panic surged in my chest. I was lying on the cold floor of the cabin. It took me a moment to gather my thoughts, to remember what had just happened. The door, the growling, the shadows. "Dad!" I shouted, scrambling to my feet. The cabin was dim, but I could still see the woman standing by the door, her back to me. I rushed to my father, who was slumped in a corner. He looked unconscious. "Please wake up," I shook him, my heart pounding.
"We need to go," he groaned softly, but didn't open his eyes. That's when I noticed the door. It stood slightly ajar, the darkness spilling inside like a thick fog. My pulse quickened as the sound of whispering filled the air again. I felt icy fingers grip my spine as the voices swirled around me, distant yet close, taunting me. "Anna, it's time," they called. "Come play." "No!" I yelled, forcing myself to focus. I remembered the bell. Where is it? I turned my gaze back to the woman. She still faced the door, murmuring something under her breath. Frustration bubbled inside me. "What are you doing?" I shouted. "We need to get out of here." She turned slowly, her expression grim. "You can't leave," she said decisively. "Not yet. It wants you to follow the voices." "I can handle it." "You can't. It will twist your fears. You must not break the circle." The walls seemed to vibrate with the intensity of the whispers as I clutched the bell tightly in my hand. I could feel its weight and power, though I still didn't understand how it worked. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed from the door. My father jolted awake, gasping for air. "What happened?" he stammered, confusion clouding his eyes. I helped him lean against the wall, struggling to steady him. "You have to believe it," I insisted, looking between him and the woman. "We're in danger. We cannot break the circle." My father's gaze was wild as he tried to process it all. "Anna, we must get out," he urged, but the woman shook her head firmly. "No, you must stay. It has a hold on you." Just then, the door swung wide open. I felt a gust of freezing air swirl inside, making everything tremble. My instinct screamed at me to run, but I stayed rooted in place, the bell in my hand feeling heavier than ever. A figure emerged from the shadows, its features unmistakable yet distorted. It was shaped like my mother, but her eyes were hollow and black, and a cruel smile stretched across her face. "Anna," she cooed,
her voice dripping with familiarity. "Come here, sweetheart. I've missed you." My heart sank. "No, you're not her!" I retreated, gripping my father tightly. "Stay back!" The woman stepped forward, raising a hand to create distance as the air thickened with the insidious whispers. "Trust your instincts, Anna. It will attempt to lure you in." Reality twisted in my mind. My breath quickened. I could feel the darkness pressing against me like a weight. This was the ultimate test. Could I resist? That's when I realized the truth. I had no idea how to break this circle. The bell started to vibrate in my hand, the sound barely audible but growing louder. It resonated with something deep within me. Then everything shifted. The room spun as if the shadows were coming alive. "Ring the bell!" the woman cried, her voice cutting through the chaos. Desperate. I raised the bell, but as I did, everything went black again. I jolted awake, the darkness lifting like a heavy fog. I was still in the cabin, but everything felt different. The air was thick, whispering and swirling around me like smoke. I blinked, trying to shake off the disorientation. My heart raced as I scanned the room, searching for my father and the woman. They were both gone. "Dad," I called out, my voice echoing against the walls. Panic tugged at my chest. I stumbled to my feet, the bell still clutched tightly in my hand. I was alone, but the whispers persisted, filling my ears with a chilling melody. "You can stay, Anna," they sang softly, "forever." "No!" I shouted, fighting back the irrational fear that clawed at my mind. I could see the shadows shift, dark figures flickering just beyond the corners of my vision. I had to find my father. I couldn't let him be taken by this place. I rushed toward the door, but it slammed shut before I reached it. The force rattled me, nearly knocking me off balance. I pressed my ear against the wood, desperate to hear something, anything. "Let him go!" I yelled, but the room responded only with silence. The shadows danced, and I felt a bitter chill creeping up my spine. Then I saw it. A soft glow beneath the space between the floor and the door. Not just light, but warmth. It pulsed rhythmically, inviting. Cautiously, I bent down and reached toward it. As my fingers brushed the floor, the light flared, illuminating a small crack beneath the door. "Anna!" The voice was muffled but familiar. My father! He was in there. "Dad!" I shouted, pounding my fist against the door. "Hold on, I'm coming." With a sudden rush of determination, I grabbed the bell and rang it forcefully, the sound cutting through the whispers like a knife. The shadows around me recoiled, hissing. "Stop!" I shouted, feeling a surge of power with every chime. I didn't understand why, but somehow I sensed that the bell was my weapon against whatever was holding my father. The door trembled, then creaked slightly open. I stumbled forward, only to freeze in shock. The woman stood there, her expression unreadable. "You shouldn't have done that," she warned, her eyes watching me carefully. "Where's my dad?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "What did you do to him?" "Fear is a powerful tool," she said, tilting her head as if studying me. "But you wield it wrong. Control it, and you might stand a chance." I could feel the pull of her words, but fear twisted inside me, making it hard to think. What did she mean? I could somehow control it? Before I could respond, the shadows began to writhe again. I saw shapes forming within them, morphing into grotesque faces. Their eyes were hungry, fixed on me. I glanced back to where the warm light seeped from the door. "You don't have to do this," I pleaded. "I can help. Just let him go." The woman laughed softly, but her eyes were cold. "You can't help him until you help yourself," she replied, "and the darkness won't let go easily." Sudden fear gripped me as I sensed the shadows advancing, reaching for me. That's when I heard it, the faintest whisper rising above the rest. "Anna, Don't let go." I turned sharply. It was my father's voice. In that moment, I realized I had a choice: to run or to face the darkness together. With a deep breath, I lifted the bell once more, ready to confront what lay on the other side of the door. I had to find my father. I had to break the circle. Then everything began to swirl again, and I felt the shadows closing in. I found myself falling again, the world collapsing into a void before reassembling in front of me. I was back in the cabin, and the oppressive whispers surged like a tide. The figure of the woman loomed in the shadows, her expression shifting with something resembling curiosity. "Where is my father?" I shouted, adrenaline igniting my voice. Time felt fragile, slipping by in unreachable seconds. I didn't understand what had happened last. Had I lost him in the darkness? But just then, a figure appeared faintly through the shimmering shadows. My heart raced as I recognized my father, looking bewildered and fragile yet tangible. "Anna!" he called, his face creased with concern, illuminated by the glow of flickering lantern light that suddenly filled the room. "Dad!" I rushed toward him, stretching out my arm as the shadows writhed around us. But something pulled between us, making it hard to reach him. The wall of darkness pulsated, sending icy fingers that wrapped around my throat, testing the resolve I had tried to muster. "Fight it, Anna!" he shouted, desperation edging his voice. "You have to believe!" The bell in my hand burned, pulsing like a heartbeat against my palm. "I will!" I yelled back, feeling an unfamiliar energy coursing through me. "I won't let them take you!" With all my strength, I raised the bell, trembling but unyielding. The shadows twisted and coiled, inching closer, their whispers tangled with anger and menace. I could feel the unsettling draw of fear creeping up my spine, but I forged ahead. "Leave us alone!" I rang the bell, its clear tones slicing through the air with a power I couldn't fully understand. The darkness wavered, recoiling as if stung. The cold fog withdrew slightly, revealing more space between us and whatever evil lurked. The woman stepped forward, an amused smile dancing on her lips. "You think a simple bell can protect you?" she challenged, the shadows rallying behind her, threatening to surge forward. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Instead, I pressed forward with a determined breath, ringing the bell again. Each chime resonated inside me, a reminder that I was more than my fear. Could fight back. I shouted my father's name, pushing against the shadows, the name fueled by an undeniable will. "Anna!" He called again, visible now through the mass of darkness that quaked at the edges. His voice pierced through, clearer amidst the din, giving me courage. With newfound confidence, I took a step closer to the enveloping shadows. "What do you want from us?" I screamed into the chaos, holding the bell tight. The cacophony of whispers buzzed angrily, threatening to drown me out, but I stood firm. "We will not let you take us." The shadows quivered violently, swirling back as the bell rang again. It was as if pure light radiated from the bell, illuminating the very corners of the darkness that shrouded the room. I felt the cold edge of despair dissolve, making space for something brighter. Hope? And then, as if cast in reverse, the shadows began to recede. It was like a tide pulling away, revealing glimpses of an old past captured in sepia tones. Faces within the darkness, reflecting a collection of memories, lost souls once full of life. I caught my father's gaze. He was struggling, but the bell's sound seemed to bring clarity. "Anna!" he strained, its reverberation washing over us both. "Trust yourself." Empowered, I stepped closer to the swirling shadows that were now reluctant, coiling against the sound of the bell, quaking as they lost their grip on the present. Dim imprints of fear flickered in their depths, and for once I understood. Something shifted inside me then, a blend of defiance and understanding. I was afraid, yes, but I wouldn't let that fear harness me. "You can't control us anymore," I declared, ringing the bell with all my might. In an impossible flash, if light could be imagined as a curtain being pulled aside, I saw it, a door breaking open in the shadows. A ripple flowed out, as if the whispers themselves were forced to flee. The dark figure that had once seemed insurmountable faltered, retreating back into the darkness, its anger dissipating like smoke under a gust. "Anna!" my father urged, managing to stagger toward me, drawn into the light that fought against the encroaching shadows. His face was suddenly clearer, as if freed from the grip of confusion. "Grab my hand!" I yelled, heart racing against the drumbeat of hope surging within. With one final ring of the bell, the last remnants of the dark energy swirled, turning chaotic and unraveling. I felt the firm warmth of his grasp, fingers lacing together as we pulled against the thickening fog, just as it began to falter. I don't know how long we stood there against the harrowing grip, enveloped by a shimmering shade that grew brighter with every heartbeat. But when it began to lift, I felt a rush of adrenaline course through me. "Now!" I shouted, and together we stepped through the portal of light just as the shadows waned behind us. It exploded into brilliance, engulfing us whole, and
Then, silence. Soft, warm stillness. I opened my eyes to see a simple sky overhead, the sun hanging low like a forgotten memory. The cabin was gone. The whispers vanished. My heart raced. The world was round and calm. "Dad?" I turned to see him sitting beside me, face pale but alive, real. The moment felt surreal. We were outside, human and together. "What just happened?" he whispered, blinking as if waking from a bitter dream. "Was it real?" I glanced around, unsure of how to explain the depths of what had happened back there, the shelter, the figure, the darkness that clung like a shroud. But as I watched the clouds drift, an indeterminate weight hung in the air. "I don't know," I finally said softly, unsure if I wanted to offer a clear answer anyway. "But we made it." But questions still lingered like shadows at the edge of my mind, dark reflections edged with uncertainty. Would those things return? Could they still find us? I couldn't ignore the thought that maybe this was just a temporary reprieve. I moved away from him slightly, a chill running along my spine. Even though the light felt warm, something nagged at me, remnants of dread I'd never really understood. And in that moment, I realized the darkness had not been permanently vanquished. It waited, hidden just out of sight, patiently anticipating, perhaps just beyond the next threshold. As I looked back toward my father, the uncertainty gnawed, but together we stepped forward, forever marked by the shadows that would always linger.